Hello and welcome to CLEA'S World. I am Clea and today I would like to share with you more of the information I've received from the 25th dimension during my last QHHT Hypnosis session. I'll be reading from a transcript of a section of the session, and when I refer to Lorrayne, I'm speaking of my practitioner who's asking me questions I prepared in advance of the session, and when I refer to me, I'm speaking of myself under hypnosis, which means that the answers are coming from the 25th. Before I start reading, I'd like to thank you as always for subscribing, liking, and commenting on this video. I really appreciate it. All right, let's start reading. Lorrayne, there are excess deaths being recorded everywhere. The intel is ascribing them to this thing. But we know it's because the bodies are dying because the essence is left months ago. How many bodies with or without essence are left from the original 2 billion we had here? Me. So we have about, they're telling me 1 to 1.1 billion bodies left here at this time. So we're about half of what we were in the beginning. We already said about 600 million people went with the aliens months and months ago. And a lot of other bodies have gone in the past couple of years, as you know. So even when we talk about excess deaths, doesn't seem like much to say 10%, 20% in some places. Think of it as just one country. These are just reported at government level. But yeah, we're about half of what we were before in terms of bodies. This is why we already said, even if we wanted, nobody's incarnating here anymore. But even if we wanted to salvage anything where you need a lot of people to work, so for example, these big companies, etc., we wouldn't be able to do it because the intention is not enough. At 3D level, you need the bodies to carry out these tasks, and we don't have the bodies anymore. Lorrayne, thank you. Would every NPC die or go bad after a long absence of the essence? Are we going to see this dying off ramp up before we leave? And in this question, I was referring to the fact that, again, a lot of our brothers and sisters have gone with the aliens months ago now, almost a year ago. So NPCs don't necessarily do great after the essence has left. They don't necessarily have to go bad, but they don't necessarily do great either. So here's the answer from the 25th. Me. Yes, we are. And ramp up, what does ramp up mean? Does it mean that all of a sudden there's going to be people dropping on the street next to us, left and right? No, it's not going to be anything dramatic. By ramping up, we mean that yes, people are going to continue dying in excess. In what, some people will say it's excess mortality. People will continue noticing, like Holly, and Holly is one of the members of this community. Hello, Holly. She's been watching random things, what we consider from a 3D perspective to be random things happening, like people dying in car fires. How many of those happen? I mean, Clea maybe thought that one car fire might happen and people didn't even die in it. Your car is in a fire and you're fine. And apparently now people are dying in those too. So yes, we're going to continue seeing all of this. And so we should say the ramped up mortality rate, not ramped up as in, again, it's going to get worse and worse where it looks dire. It's not going to look dire. We don't want it to look dire. We don't want anything to look dire. We've had enough of all that drama. And so that's going to continue happening. Now, your question was, do NPCs eventually go bad one way or the other when the essence has been gone for a while? Generally speaking, yes. Generally speaking, we say, because of course, every NPC, just like these bodies have different personalities, they also have different capabilities, different pros and cons, different strengths and weaknesses. But generally speaking, the body without an essence, first of all, is going to be very prone to following the energy. Now, we have changed the energy here. We've changed vibration. The vibration is balanced, so therefore it's not the negative vibration we had before. But there are still a lot of low vibrational products out there that we all have access to. And so by default, if you don't have an essence protecting you, it's much more likely, it's much easier to have an accident. Let's put it that way. Or to have a negative consequence or side effect. So in that sense, yes, it's much more likely. Now, I think that the gist of the question was, the main gist was, will a body survive without an essence? Like, would a body just be destined to go bad or have a short lifespan without an essence? Not necessarily. I mean, we have said even in the beginning, we had 300 million NPCs. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know that they didn't have an essence if you didn't feel into them, and they were perfectly fine. But now, what does perfectly fine mean? We are a very unhealthy society. For example, in the United States, if you saw NPCs, they might have not looked all that healthy, but they would have fit right in. So yeah, but can you have NPCs that are perfectly fine? Yes, you can. Absolutely. This happens. We said there are children that don't get an essence when there's no essence incarnated in them when they come out of the womb. And then they go on to have what we consider normal lives. So yes, it's possible. You don't have to go, a body does not have to perish just because there is no essence. But we will say one more thing. We will remind you of something we said before. When a body is being used, so we're talking about NPCs that were NPCs from the beginning, from birth. But when a body is being used to having an essence, it's more prone to having issues after the essence leaves, because again, it can't really adjust to the lack of energy or to the energy, to the different energy. So there's that as well. And that's why we've seen a lot of these things happen. These things are not necessarily happening to people who were NPCs from the beginning. It's happened to people who did have essences and the essence is gone. And all of a sudden they're just going all right. Lorrayne, thank you. How is the polarity in percentage terms and how is this showing up in 3D? Me. So they're telling me 51%. And I don't know if it's 51. Is it 51 negative or positive? And this is me asking myself to clarify the answer I'm getting. Not that it matters. 51% is basically we're in the middle. They're actually telling me it's 51 positive polarity right now. But basically it's 50-50, which again doesn't have to be 50-50, but that's how rebalanced we are right now. We're in the middle. So how is the polarity showing up in 3D? How it's showing up in 3D is that, and you can feel it, and Claire is feeling it now because again, she's in this feeling state, whereas normally she's in doing state, and therefore she doesn't really feel into this. But if you judge obviously with your eyes, of course, there are a lot of good things coming up. And again, we're seeing the inexorable march towards the recall, for example. That's one way it's showing up. But it's also showing up because it's a lot lighter here. You can feel that. It is a lot lighter. The energy is a lot lighter. Even though it feels like the reason we're having a little bit of trouble explaining this is because it's hard to distinguish it from the fact because we feel like we are in charge now. We are feeling more powerful, but it's also helping. So it goes hand in hand with that. So it's difficult to separate the two concepts. But basically, the way that it's showing up is that we do feel like we want to say, there's less waiting on us. There's less coming at us, or there's less negativity out there. Now, the way that you're keeping the shell in place for yourself is that you want to only focus on negative things and say to yourself, things will never change, which is perfectly fine. Then, of course, you might not notice. But the truth is, for example, Clea, who doesn't watch any YouTube channels, doesn't follow any information anymore, she's being very careful because she wants to feel the energy in an impartial manner. She knows, as we're saying this, and she feels it, that it is a lot lighter here than it used to be. And it all goes hand in hand. And again, how you see it show up in 3D is that we are moving towards the oppression has ceased. What we lived through in the last 2 years does not exist anymore. You've probably seen how they come up with things because there are people that put this information in the Telegram group, and that's how Clea sees it. You can probably see that there are people that are trying to say, and not the people in the group, but there are people out there, NPCs out there, they're trying to say, oh, we're going to have mask mandates here again, for another reason, another excuse, climate change or whatever it is. And we're going to have a lockdown here. Clea feels it, that it doesn't feel oppressive like it did before. It's almost like, boring. It's the same thing again. We didn't feel like this before, did we? When we're going through this, the emotions were very different because the energy was very different. There was this energy of oppression, this energy of, oh my goodness, the negativity is ramping up. And we did have negativity peaking, really. Now, of course, it was also the last hooray, as we called it before, of the dark. So of course it would be peaking, but we then decided we're not supporting this anymore. So that's how it shows up. And it is showing up more and more. Really, if you simply pay attention or stand back without an agenda, you will see that a lot of good stuff is coming up that we would have never in a million years thought would happen, even just 2 years ago, a year ago. Even a year ago, we're still talking about mandating Not talking about mandating, actually forcing people to get this thing, even just a year ago, January 2021. We're not talking about ancient history here. You couldn't travel. You couldn't travel without wearing a mask and proving that you had been injected with this thing in most of the world until 6 months ago, 5 months ago. And please keep in mind that this session was done on January 5th. So this was, I remember going to Italy in the spring and they still were checking this very much. All right, I'm going to continue reading here. We're talking about yesterday here, and all of a sudden we changed all of this. Things don't just happen. These things, you know, you can look at it, which is what we are wanting to do. We're choosing to do. You can look at it from a 3D perspective and say, well, of course, there's no more emergency, and therefore, of course, we never believed in the emergency. But from a 3D perspective, you would say there is no more emergency, so of course, governments have no more excuse to do this. So of course, they would have to pull back. No, they didn't. We've said this before. They didn't. Even now you hear they're pushing, but because they don't have the excuse, because we don't believe in it anymore. So everybody's fighting, resisting. Every time they say, oh, famous flu, we're like, oh, can you just stop? We don't want to hear that word ever again. Now, they can always make up stuff. They're still doing the same thing. They tried to pull in, and this is the other germ that they tried to tell us was a big deal, what I like to call the simian pocus. So they tried to pull in the simian pocus or whatever. They did try. It's not sure that this was inevitable. None of this was inevitable. They were planning. In China, they were still trying. They're still trying now. They're still saying that they want 0 famous flu, which means the only way to have 0 famous flu is for everybody to be dead. That's the only way, because they can always make up that you have it, even if you're perfectly healthy. They have the tests, and they were laughing, telling you that you have it, so you have it. Just yesterday, one of Claire's friends told her that she had this famous flu over Christmas, and Claire was rolling her eyes. They were on the phone, so her friend couldn't say. They were laughing, and her friend said, oh, it's funny because I didn't have any symptoms, but I lost my sense of smell and taste, and my kids had it, so therefore I must have had it. I didn't go get tested, but I must have had it. Okay, at least she didn't get tested, so she's just pretending. Yeah, it's what it is. And Claire loves her friend. This is not a criticism to her. It's just that Claire is tired of even hearing the word. She says, can we just move on? Just the fact that we believe that something that did not exist before all of a sudden exists, you know, a virus, a novel virus. That is such a ridiculous affirmation. Claire's quite upset about that, but there is no judgment on people that want this. We said this a million times. We're all playing the game. But we are bringing this up because there are many, even now, that want to believe in it. Now we're NPCs mostly, we know this, but there are many that want to believe in the equivalent, in the same vibrational feeds. So they might not believe that the famous flu is real, or they might not believe that the governments are friends and they're trying to protect us from this, you know, invisible enemy. But they are believing, they're choosing to believe that somebody's coming to save us and that, you know, we will get them back. Again, it's the we against them, which is the game we play. It's totally fine. But that's what we're talking about. If you don't particularly care for that kind of shell to be the way that you believe in the shell, the way that you keep the shell in place, you will actually realize that things have changed. And then you're seeing, if you just look at the steps, Claire was just saying, tick tock, we are getting there. It's one step after the other. It's how everything has worked here. How many times have we said to you, everything you're doing today, you've aligned yourself with, meaning you set up one step and it was one step after the other. One experience brought you to the next. This is exactly what we're seeing played out in the shell. Lorrayne. Okay. The rest of the previous question, which is a follow-up to what you said, was the outside shell is still in place. In fact, there are even plans to begin climate lockdowns and restrictions like in Oxfordshire. And the personal shell is still as low vibe as always. So how can we see the rebalanced polarity you told us we have now? And how many S's are left in St. Louis? Me. And I asked this, of course, because I am personally invested in how many S's are left here, because it does become tedious and heavy to deal with the fact that every time I go out or talk to anybody on the phone, I'm telling myself, you know, I joke about it with myself, but it does weigh on me, where I said, these are my imaginary friends. So yeah, I was curious. Me. So yeah, so the climate change, Oxfordshire, etc., it's empty. There is, and Clay is seeing it and feeling it. She's seeing, we're showing her. It's almost like a black piece of paper. So it's just a paper. It's two-dimensional. There's nothing behind it. So it's black, but there's nothing behind it. There is nothing supporting. There is no intention behind it. This entire climate narrative, the lockdowns, etc., or taxes even, it's empty. We're not supporting this anymore. It's done. So it's just, you know, a little piece of paper in the wind. So there's that. And then how many SSs are left? They're telling me a handful, and they do mean a handful. So it's pretty much us. There aren't that many SSs left in St. Louis. They're saying 11. Okay, there's 11. I mean, we were millions of people around here. So yeah, and that's what we're trying to say, is that Claire is now very much becoming consciously aware that she's here by herself. And it's not just happening to Claire. And this is why we don't believe we're going to stay here a lot longer. But again, it's up to you on what we decide to do after the recall. Because the fact is, we are now very well aware that we're here by ourselves. Lorraine. Okay, well, on that note, how many are left in the town or area that I live in? Me, 3 people. They're saying there are 3 people. And I'm sharing this not because it's relevant for you to know how many people are around, with essences are left around Lorraine or myself, but because these are the numbers we're dealing with. When we say that there are only a few million of people with essences left on this planet, considering how big the planet is, it really means that most of us are only dealing with NPCs at this point. So unless you're lucky enough to have maybe a person or 2 in your life who still has an essence. I'm lucky because, of course, I have a small child, and normally children do go with their parents. So because I'm going to New Earth, my daughter's essence is still here, but this is not typical unless you have children. Lorraine, isn't that interesting? And she was laughing. Okay, thank you. This is a question that I had. In terms of essences left on this planet, how many of the essences here now are human? How many are animal? And how many are currently expressed as nature, as in trees, etc.? Me. So we answered this question, but we'll summarize. So we said we're about 10 to 15 million left, but really we're about 10 million essences left worldwide right now, humans. And as Clea mentioned, we told her the other day when she was doing the live that we have 7% animals. We actually have a little bit less now. We have 6% animals left at this point, and we have 2% nature. Yeah, so that's not very many. And these last stragglers, you know, all of us, there are the last stragglers here. Many of us are going to go to New Earth, and the rest are going to hang out with the aliens, obviously, because they don't have to take their bodies anymore. We don't have to take our bodies to go hang out with the aliens anymore. None of us who is left is going to 3D chambers at this point, obviously. Lorraine. Okay, maybe I need to separate this out. As far as animals, the animals that have essences, they're going to New Earth with those of us that are going to New Earth. Can you give us a number roughly? How many of those are left on the planet? Me. Oh, you mean what percentage of the essences incarnated as animals on the planet are going to New Earth? Is that what you're asking? Lorraine, not percentage. I would like a number. And it's how many of the companion animals, the animals that are in the care of those of us that are on the side of the light, that are going to New Earth. How many of those are still here? Me. So all the animals that are companions with people that are going to New Earth are going to New Earth. But yes, we're talking about, so it's hard to give a number because you're asking for a number of how many animals we had on this planet, and we had trillions of animals. So what we would say is that, again, 7% of the original animals still have essences here, and 2% are going to New Earth. 2% of the original number are going to New Earth. Again, we had trillions and trillions, like quadrillions of animals here, because first of all, there are so many animals we haven't, you know, from a 3D perspective, we haven't even discovered. We like to say discover, but also, of course, there are insects. There's all kinds of animals. That's why there were many, many more than humans to start with. Yeah, so only 2% are going to New Earth, which is a lot. We're still going to have a lot of animals. Again, New Earth is going to look, we want it to look in some ways reminiscent of old Earth. So we're still going to have the same balance. In fact, we have a question coming up from Clea that asks about the balance. So we'll wait until you ask that question to answer it. But we wanted to make this promise, which is we do want a certain balance in the way that these planets look. And so we'll always have more animals, a lot more animals in nature than we have essences incarnated as humans. Lorraine, thank you. There's an impressive amount still left if you consider still 7% left, 2% going to New Earth. So does that mean that animal essences have gone with the aliens? Me, yes, absolutely, yes. Lorraine, awesome. I hadn't thought about that before, so awesome. Me, we've actually talked about my parents' animals. They were waiting for my mother and brother, and they have gone now. They've also gone with the aliens. So actually this last answer, I hadn't thought of my parents' animals because they were initially waiting for my mother and brother to leave to go with the aliens. And then they stayed behind to support my dad, who was already an NPC at some point while they were still here. And then eventually they just left to, it appears. So, and actually, yeah, I'm feeling into it as I speak. And yes, they are gone. There's nothing, no SSS left there, which is, you know, we always like to pretend that everything is normal as it used to be. But unfortunately, when we do stop to feel into things, we realize everything has changed here, which hopefully is a good thing. I know that my loved ones are in good hands, so it's all right. All right, well, thank you so much for watching this video. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.